main room. So, morning everyone, and a warm welcome. It's going to be a warm welcome because it's going to be a very hot day, as we all know. Welcome to the Lincoln Show. The topic today is building resilience in times of change. I think it links with the Chamber's leadership through change, which is an ongoing program. My name's Roy Colcliffe. I only just joined in the last couple of months the Chamber of Commerce here in Lincolnshire, so I'm getting to know the ropes a little bit with the team, and they're a great team, as I think most of you will already know of them. If you want to look at my background, just the easier way rather than spend time on this is to perhaps look up on the LinkedIn, and you'll see that. I'd like to extend a nice warm welcome also to David O'Brien, who's joined us. David is from Business Doctors, a company I know quite well, and they offer tremendous service support to businesses. And also on the panel, we've got Phil Hutchinson. I think, is it Langton Change?
Langton, just Langton.
Langton Developments, Phil?
Yeah, will do, that'll do.
Okay, just to advise everyone, just so they're aware that the webinar is being recorded today, so you're all aware of that. The overview, just very briefly on the agenda, we're going to spend 15-20 minutes on 2 or 3 prescribed questions that we've already prepared, 15-20 minutes on those, maybe 10 minutes from our guests that have all joined us kindly this morning, and then a 5-minute summary at the end, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back, the guests, through to the main room. So starting off with the first question for the panel today is, what are the fundamentals a business should focus on to make them more resilient? So perhaps I could start with you, David, as to what you think those key elements might be.
Okay, thanks, Roy. Yeah. So obviously we're looking at resilience in the context of COVID and coming back from lockdown. I think the 3 fundamentals are to look at our sales, cash, and people. Before you get into operations, products, and services, you need to ensure that you've got sales, cash, and people where you want them to be, because you can have the most fantastic product or service in the world, you can have a brilliant way of delivering it, but if nobody's buying it, then you don't have a business. So sales is the first thing, and it's something that for some businesses, this has been a busy period. For some businesses, it's been the same as normal, but for most businesses, then sales have taken a real hit in the last 12, 13 weeks. And sales is really important to get a handle on when you come back, looking forward for the next 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 12 months. What do your sales look like? Have you got a clear handle on your sales pipeline? Are you ensuring that revenue is going to be coming into the business? So making sure you're in touch with your customers, making sure that you're not kidded by a surge. When we come back, for a lot of businesses, there'll be a bit of a bounce because there'll be some pent-up demand. So not thinking if the first week or two is really good, that means that everything's going to be good for the next 6 months, because it may, as some businesses have already seen, go back down again. So
I think
having a clear handle on your sales,
yeah.
having a clear handle on your sales, having a clear handle on cash. The most common reason that businesses go out of business is lack of cash. So making sure that you understand your cash flow and having a clear view of that. So a lot of businesses don't track cash flow. They know what they charge for something, but they don't really know what that flow looks like. It's really important to have a cash flow forecast going forward to understand what's coming in, what's going out. The fundamentals of cash flow, the amount of money you've got coming in, the amount of money you've got going out. What you can do with cash flow is you can increase the amount coming in, you can increase the speed at which it comes in, you can reduce the amount going out, you can reduce the speed at which it goes out. So looking at those 4 levers of cash flow is really key, understanding how that's going to look, because this is, for a lot of businesses, this is the dangerous period when you go back. They've been protected potentially by furlough, business grants, CE bills or bounce back loans, has allowed them to go through this period. And it's when you go back and your costs go up in front of your revenue that is the dangerous period, and understanding what cash flow looks like is key. And then People, making sure that the people coming back into your business are in the right position. If they've had 12, 13 weeks at home, they're not just going to switch back on like that. So you need to understand their position, understand how they're coming back into the business, how you can look after them and support them. So sales, cash, and people go before we look at operations and products and services and that kind of thing. So I think they're the fundamentals to make sure you've got nailed down first off.
Well, thanks for that, David. Phil, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think like we were just chatting before your guests joined the room, we kind of split in organisational resilience and personal resilience. And I completely agree with what David said about the organisational thing with the processes and the systems. But just to hone in on that third element, which is kind of where my background comes in and my specialities lie, it's about the personal resilience, because any organization's most valuable resource is nearly always its people, and yet sometimes the least invested in, the least developed, the least looked after. Sometimes people get so focused on whatever it is, you know, that they're selling or how they're going to do it or the processes, and that is really important. But if you think about a DARES management model, there's task, there's team, and there's individuals. You know, there's two parts of that which focuses on people, and I think that suggests that that it's an area of focus. So for me, it's around looking at motivation factors, because personal resilience comes from people being happy and motivated and engaged. And if you read any kind of research into what motivates people, it's nearly always 3 or 4 key things. There's job satisfaction, praise and recognition, feeling valued. It's those 3 things which are either made or broken by the managers of your people. So for me, taking aside the process and the organizational processes, which is really valid, it's making sure that you focus on how your managers manage the people within your organization, how they look after them, after they support them. And I suppose it's worth mentioning also, and I know that there's a few people here in the room with us who are also sole traders or self-employed like myself. You know what? It's just as important to manage ourselves as it is for a manager to look after a whole team of people. So it's about us lot looking after ourselves as well. So people focus, like I say, motivation, skills, job satisfaction, praise and recognition, and value in people and supporting them. Those are the key things for me, I think.
Okay, thanks for that, Phil. I'm just thinking that our attendees, our guests that are attending and listening to that, just for everyone's benefit, neither Phil, David, or I have met before this webinar today. This morning, I actually wrote down cash, people, customer engagement, and that's not just that's just quite spooky, really. That we're very much aligned on the very same topics, and I guess our guests joining us are probably thinking exactly the same, that they're thinking that, but it's not as simple as that, is it? It's not just as simple as that. We could be saying that 6 months ago, I guess, and that would still be pertinent then. What I'm thinking is it's the cash that's going to hurt, isn't it? In business today, with what's happened to everyone, the customers will be suffering perhaps in a similar way, and the staff will be wondering where their future is. The cash is the thing that I think is going to be under, in most companies, unless you've got quite a nice treasury sat to one side, and nobody has, not many I know of. So is it worth looking at that, not just from a cash flow 13 weeks that we all do, but should we not be leveraging the support and the grants that you can get and get them in place should you need them? That's what I would be doing, I think, gentlemen.
Yeah, I think certainly we've been advising business.
Go on, David. Right.
We've been advising businesses to do that for the last 10 weeks with CBILS, and particularly bounce back loans, because CBILS are quite onerous to apply for. But bounce back loans have been, for most banks, some have been a bit of a pain, but for most banks have been pretty easy to apply for. 1 or 2 pages to fill in, pretty much a self-certification of what your business income is. And that buffer, we've been encouraging businesses to seriously think about just taking it, even if they don't feel they need it at the moment, because you can have it for 12 months, you can give it straight back and not have paid a penny because the interest is covered by the government for the first year. And just having that as a safety net. So one of the elements of resilience is having a financial safety buffer, if you like, within the business. Businesses which survive best in the long term have got the cash to ride the difficult periods out for a while. So yeah, seriously looking at, if you haven't taken a bounce back loan, whether you just take that, protect it within the business, or invest it in the business for how you want to change for the future. Because when we get on to coming back, and I know that's a question we've got coming up, we need to look at not just trying to get back to where we were, but trying to get to where we want to be in 12, 24, 36 months time. So potentially money to invest in the business at this period.
Okay.
Do you know, I think the only thing to bear in mind is that there isn't no one size fits all, is there, for anybody? A business loan might be absolutely perfect and the godsend for one, and yet could be a shackle and a burden. I know what you're saying, David. You cannot spend it, but you know, it's a temptation for some, isn't it? And actually, the same applies. There's no such thing as one rule for everybody. What you were saying there, Roy, about the grants and stuff, it's difficult because there are so many people who are absolutely disenfranchised with the whole system because they're not eligible for anything. You know, I'm not eligible for a penny of the grant system. Nothing fits my circumstances. Okay. So, not that that's a problem, because the resilience was already there in the first place. So all those things that you were talking about, fortunately, I'm only a year into being self-employed, those kind of things were in place because of the advice and support and help that I've got from the business community, from people at networking events or people at the chamber or clients that I've worked with. Everybody's got a two-penneth, and I think that's the important thing, to be able to take all the advice from all the different people who are out there trying to help, which is fantastic, and then apply it to your own circumstances.
Okay, well, thanks for that, gentlemen. Now, I'm going to move it along a little. It would be interesting towards the end when our guests, if we can open it up, I'd be very interested to hear how people have experienced who have applied for assistance, because we hear that there's so much support. In my mind, I'm just wondering what the real world is and who's applied, and as David indicated earlier, maybe it's not so easy as it first seems. Let's move on, if I may, to the next question that came up, which was, is there a role for businesses not only to look at practice and process to manage resilience, but also the mental well-being of the teams, or the teams within the company? So we'll start with you on that one, Phil. I think I started with David before, didn't I?
I think there always has been. I mean, anyone that thinks that looking after the well-being of their teams isn't important, then, you know, I think you're on a high road to nothing. But the concept of well-being and resilience and mental health is getting a lot of attention, and great. But also there's a downside to that, in as much as people are associating certain stigmas and problems with the terminology. So actually, when you're talking about all this kind of thing, whilst of course it is mental health, and whilst of course it's personal resilience, and yes, it's well-being, all that kind of stuff, it's just down to management and maintenance of staff, looking out for people and supporting them again. However, when you look at how the hell can we do this kind of stuff, sometimes organizations are sitting there and they're like, where do I start? Because it's such a big issue. There's something here about looking in the mirror. If you look in the mirror and find that there's something that you were missing with regard to how you're looking after your staff and your well-being as the staff, then now's the time to do something about it. But there are 5 strands to well-being in a lot of reading, and it looks at connections, mindfulness, giving, learning, and staying active. So the connections, keeping connections with colleagues and support networks going. Mindfulness, taking notice of what's important to you, what does success look like, you know, what's your vision and what's your goals. Giving can be your time or your support, or just an ear, lending an ear to someone. What can you give to people because of the dopamine hit you get from giving and doing good things? Learning is obviously keeping the grey matter active, and the staying active is obviously relating the physical wellness to our mental wellness. So those are 5 things that an organisation could focus on if they want somewhere to start, and that's what I think. So it's about keeping support of staff and looking at mindfulness concepts.
Well, I think, Phil, you know, just to come back to you there, that's a great response to that question. It sounds an easy question, but I think you've responded, certainly looked into that. There's no question right now that with this virus and all that we've experienced, that this is new for everybody. I've been, like most of people on the webinar in business for many, many years, and we will not have ever experienced anything of this kind. This is new. So I think the normal parameters of managing people, and we all know what they are, you've described them quite well, are in need of additional support. I think we're in a new world of learning. Well, how much do we have to increase that engagement and that discussion within ourselves? I like the one you said, first of all, starts with yourself and making sure your well-being's good, in good shape, and then the teams, and I guess it expands to your customers and your suppliers, because they're going through the same process. In many ways, hopefully it could come back and help us, because it's in a strange way, it's bringing us all together with suppliers, employees, and customers in a way that I'm looking at the positive here now. I think I'm a very positive person, and the glass is always half full for me. I think when we do have a bit of a bounce back, I think we'll have relationships, hopefully, that will have improved, whether it's within ourselves and our teams, our customers or suppliers. We'll have learned something that no other situation like this virus could ever have put us through. Would that be something you'd share, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think Phil absolutely talks that health and well-being is not an issue for now. It's been an issue for years, and it should be an issue for years. It's an ongoing issue. But I think looking particularly in the context of this situation, we've been with the businesses we're working with, looking at the change curve, which is based on the grief curve created by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969, and the stages that people have gone through in this lockdown. So the stages are shock and denial, acceptance, experimentation, decision, and engagement. So shock and denial, at the start of the lockdown, we would have heard people saying, I can't believe this, it's ridiculous that I can't visit my mum in the next village. Then we go into acceptance, and acceptance is an important phase to go through, but it's a really dangerous phase as well, because if we stay in acceptance of, well, I can't control the environment, this is what's happening, I've been told to stay at home, I can't do anything, then that can be very dangerous. And we want people to move through that, to experiment, try new things, make decisions about what's going to happen, and then engage back, and particularly engage back with the business when they come back in. But understanding how people have gone through that curve and where they are on the curve, whether they've looped back into acceptance, is going to be really important when people come back into the business. What stage are they at? They're not necessarily ready to just pick up where they left on the 22nd of March or whatever the date was that they started working from home or went on furlough or whatever the particular situation is. And also not just them, but other people in their household. Even people who are used to working from home, and I know a lot of people on this call will do a lot of work from home already. We're probably doing it in a situation where our partner is also at home, children are at home being homeschooled, there are a lot of other dependencies. So understanding not just the employee, but also the family situation is really important. So that change curve has been a really useful tool for the businesses we've worked with, just to think about where are the people in the business and how do we move them forward and get them to re-engage with the business.
Okay, thanks for that, David. One, I think, final question, prescribed one, and I think then we'll open it up, because I'm conscious that we've already started to get close to the 10:15, but we didn't start until 5 to. So I think we'll be forgiven for running over a little to maybe 10:20. The question I have here is, we're now seeing the transition from managing the crisis, keeping the organization functioning, to managing the transition back to a renewed future. How do we understand and manage this shift from now and to the future? I think first question I would ask within that question is, are we actually at the point of seeing that transition right now, or are we still in the middle of not being phased by it, but whereabouts are we? Would we three of us on the panel agree that we are actually at a point now where we can seriously look at transitioning into however our new business is going to need to be?
I think that, as Phil said earlier on, every business is different.
Yeah.
So some have already transitioned back, some are in the process of transitioning, and some will take a bit longer. So we can talk in generalities about the transition and how that happens. It will be different for each business. I think, again, that initial period is really important in terms of cash flow, because costs go back up before revenue goes back up. So you have to be realistic. You have to do some worst case scenario planning and really understand what's the worst that could happen in terms of cash, and can I survive that situation? Communication is vital. Communicating to your customers, clients, potential customers, what is happening within the business when you are back ready, what you're able to do, what they have to do to engage with you, again, with your team, with your employees, with any suppliers. What is their situation? Because you may be ready to go back, your suppliers may not be. And working with partners as well is really key. So communication is really important. And planning. So I started off with sales, cash people, and planning as well. And contingency planning is really important. So most businesses will have some kind of business continuity or contingency planning, but that'll need to be updated in terms of COVID. So what's your plan for if you have to close again? You know, we can open back up, but we've seen Apple stores in America open back up and then close again in certain states where COVID goes back up. So if the government goes for a localization, Lincolnshire could close down and the rest of the country keep going. You may not, you may have an outbreak for employees and not be able to carry on. So thinking about what happens in terms of your business having to close down again, if there's a national lockdown again, a regional lockdown, if schools close, is that going to affect your business or the people working in it? Suddenly the children are back at home and they need to be looked after. If you have an employee testing positive and you have to, he or she has to self-isolate, do you know what your cross-cover arrangements are? One of the issues that a lot of businesses face is silos of knowledge. So each person knows their area particularly well, but they can't cover for anybody else. And they don't actually know that person over there obviously does a fantastic job, but I haven't got a clue what it is. This is a great opportunity to share what other people in the business do. And if that person or that department were really affected, how could we cover it? What would happen? And thinking about that, you know, as you go back rather than waiting until it actually does happen.
Okay, thank you.
The concept of that transition back into whatever I kind of hate the phrase, but the new normal, it's one of those things that everybody's talking about a lot. But as you transition into the new normal, just to, again, follow the theme of the answering that we did earlier, David's talked nicely about the processes and the systems, and to pick up on the people element again, it's interesting to consider what new processes that you're going to need as you transition into a different working style. I was literally in a session an hour ago before this one. There was a lady there saying how fab it is that she's been able to release some real estate and save some money. And it's like, well, that's great, fantastic. What a boon for your organization. But let's not forget the impact and the support that is given from that community approach to work in practice. For those people who are in a shared office, or they have access to colleagues and managers, and if they have a question, they can just pop in or ask the person sat next to them. It's a really important part of creating that sense of community, which again supports ongoing well-being. So if you are in a position like the majority of us, where people are home working, there's two sides to this. There's one, how on earth do we cope with that? And I've been working on a one-to-one basis with a lot of people who really find the blurring of the boundaries to be difficult, just because of what David said. You know, you're now at home, you're expected to be productive. There's a guilt factor. What on earth am I doing? The kids are running in, the cat walks across the screen. I was watching somebody in the group session, and a cat walked in front of the webcam. Always makes me laugh. But all these kind of things can leave you really isolated, and that is danger territory. When you get isolated and you're working on your own, you need the community, you need the support, whether it's your shift or your colleagues or what have you. So maintaining the lines of communication, again, just like David says, is going to be absolutely key. Somebody asked one of the questions, is it important that we communicate during this time? It's like, oh my God, well, of course it is. Yeah. It always was, but it's even more so now, because you've got to keep on top of it. If you are going to identify abnormal behavior, that's one of the signs of stress, is to notice abnormal behavior, because we all react in different ways. So you can't say we all do the same thing, because we do things differently. One of the keys is that behavior abnormal? Well, how can you identify abnormal behavior if you don't know what normal behavior looks like? If you don't know your staff well enough or your team well enough to know what normal is and what they're doing with their time, how are we ever going to be able to support and identify abnormal? And that comes from communication. It's the same theme. It's almost like a get out answer, but it is true. It's about communication. It's about people. It's about systems, just as you guys said, and with the people element, it's about maintaining those lines of effective communication. That's what's important.
Okay, thanks for that, Phil. Gentlemen, you know, for my first chamber webinar, thank you for your input. You've made it very easy for me. There are some more questions here, but knowing, as I said at the beginning, that time will run on as it does very quickly. Could we open this up to our guests on the line? Is there any questions that anyone has that they'd like to introduce to us? I think they mentioned a chat box, but I can't see a chat box on my screen here. I can, yes, there is down here. There's 8 questions, so maybe we should tell the webinar we've got. We need another hour, I think. Are we really enjoying it? So from Sponsor Police ACC, Karen Wilson, to everyone, there are also lots of scams out there where furlough claims are being made from non-genuine businesses. Do people know who to go to if they suspect a problem? That's a really good question. Anybody want to respond to that very, very quickly because with time?
I've seen quite a few events hosted. I mean, there's some colleagues of some Lincolnshire police colleagues put events on looking at cybercrime, which is really interesting. But it's one of the things, if you use Eventbrite and look at cybersecurity, it's a fascinating way of upskilling your own knowledge and understanding, because I imagine we all know little bits. There's one tomorrow, for example, from Business Lincolnshire, another group that are putting on an event. So I think it's worth, if you don't know where to go to get advice and guidance, obviously Karen can give us some more pointers, but I think educating ourselves is going to be a really useful first port of call.
Okay, there's a reply from Jackie Adams to everyone saying, I think the HMRC is the place to raise a potential issue. And I think Karen, I should say, apologies, Karen, and that's where the problem lies. Sadly, their ability and capacity to make the relevant inquiries are limited. Yeah, I think we've all been on the end of the phone with the HMRC, sadly. Moving on to the next question. Let's just see what we've got. There's another question I can look at there, or?
Somebody was talking about the 2-tier, how people are going to come back. Some people are thriving and some people are on their knees.
Thanks for that.
Comment that was made. I think that's probably quite a key. But again, it's another reason why this one-size-fits-all approach can't really be taken, because like you said, and in the session before, there are some people who are worked off, working down to the bone. And there are other people who are absolutely destitute because all the work has disappeared overnight. So I guess it's down to how we contextualize our support based on the needs of an individual.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Phil. I didn't pick that one up, so hopefully that's of interest. There's one from Jackie Adams to everyone. Something else I've heard over the last few months is that employees have not known what they can and can't do with furlough employees, to the point where they just haven't communicated with them at all, leaving them feeling isolated and in the dark about what is happening with the business. This really does sit well with what we've been talking about earlier, about so important to communicate more than ever. We all know the procedures are there in normal times, and these are not normal times. I think arm around someone and explaining exactly what's going on is crucial, because I would hope that most people who are furloughed are genuinely intended to come back in the business, because we all know how costly it is to get new employees in, trained up, etc., etc. So thank you for that question, Jackie. I don't know if our panel want to just add anything to that.
I don't think so. Matches what David was saying about the communication, the change curve. The thing that gets you from A to B quicker is to keep people informed, isn't it?
It is indeed. Yeah.